Welcome, everyone. We are grateful that thou hast lended thy ear to the Round Table podcast. The Knights of the Round Table intend to discuss modern issues through the eternal wisdom of the Bible and encourage others in these uncertain times. Consider following us and sharing the podcast with as many brothers in Christ as possible, and most importantly, enjoy thyselves.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Round Table Podcast. Thank you for listening. Right here this week, we have joining us a very special guest, Matt Heath.
Hey, y'all.
And he's here for the first time. We're going to be talking a little bit about, more or less, if I'm going to try to sum it up, the Christian influence on specifically the founding of America. Not a discussion whether or not, because there's a lot of debate around, can America be classified as a Christian nation today, considering all the problems it has? But we're not going to talk about that. We're going to talk about specifically the founding of America and the influence Christians had on it. You might have seen videos online. There's some who say, pro-Christian nationalism, yes, all the founding fathers, or at least most of them, were Christian. And then there's others that say, well, some of them were Christian. A lot of them were, agnostic or deists or believed in other religions. So we're going to be talking about just some of the stuff relating to that, to kind of give a big overarching idea about this. There's one creator, Reformed Zoomer, who is a Calvinist Presbyterian guy, and he makes a lot of great videos. I love his videos. And one of them, he talks about specifically Presbyterianism and how much influence that denomination had on the American Revolution, which, to be fair, is a lot. And so there's this website that I pulled up to get more information about it, and it's thebridgehead.ca. Specifically, this article is called "The American Revolution Was a Presbyterian Revolt." The article is written by Jonathan Van Maren in 2020. But this is pretty cool. It basically starts out by having a quote from British people at the time of the Revolution, basically saying, "Oh yeah, we know that the Americans are vastly inspired by the Presbyterian Church and stuff like that." So we're gonna get into some of that. First off, for Presbyterianism, there's this famous quote. I think I have it right here on this website. And it is actually from King George himself. And he says this. So, let's see. King George III himself concurred, calling it a Presbyterian war, referring to the Revolutionary War. Because hearing of the American rebel leaders, he exclaimed, "Are they not Presbyterians? Of course they're going to be rebellious against, the British because they're Presbyterians." And the reason why he said that has a lot to do with what Presbyterians were doing at the time, because Presbyterianism started more or less in Scotland. And Scotland and of course England have had a rough history where they're always butting heads and one is rebellion against the other. And so Presbyterians in turn get a habit of being rebellious. And so you have King George himself at the time acknowledging that, hey, you're all just a bunch of Presbyterians, which not all, because you had Congregationalists, you had Baptists, you had Puritans, you also had Anglicans. And so you had a lot of these different denominations more or less on the same side and influenced by the same people. But to be fair, a large number were Presbyterian. So one of the key concepts I want to touch upon is the concept of just war and the American Revolution. Many Christian colonists and founders justified the American Revolution through the lens of just war theory, developed by apparently Augustine and Aquinas, which are two famous church writers, Christians from a long time ago. And so they will throw around verses Romans, chapters like Romans 13. I haven't read it yet. But basically, it is debated heavily whether or not the loyalists, those who were loyal to Britain, were no, we should have submission to authority like Jesus commands. While you have the patriots that are well, if you're a tyrant king, then you're not a legitimate ruler. And so I want to get your thoughts on, like, do you think, what's your thoughts, like, on just war, like a war being justified?
I think it is like their intentions. Like, is it justice or is it versus self-interest? Because, like, the colonists wanted, like, not rule over them, like, with tyranny, like, because they were taxing them, and that was a lot of the issues they had, and that's why they did the Boston Tea Party, dumping it into the water. And a lot of the conflict too is, I think, religion had tied into it because, you know, they had left on the Mayflower, went into Jamestown, and then they spread it out throughout the 13 colonies, because all the way down to South Carolina. I don't think it got down to Florida yet until like the 1900s. 19th century, I mean. But they, I would say too, is the counterpoint, many colonists believed that they were defending God-given right.
Yeah, I mean, in that sense of them, of like just war being, it is justified because it is our God-given right and stuff like that. My question is, and this is kind of like a lot of like, you'll have a lot of propaganda from all sides, especially during wars. And one of the things that I actually didn't realize, because growing up I was just like, oh yeah, America the good guys, British people are the bad guys. But then when I actually researched history, I realized, well, there's some weird things in that, like how the British freed slaves before America did. Yeah. And how King George, the supposed tyrant, actually was a self-proclaimed Christian, and because he was Christian, abolished slavery and stuff like that. And apparently he argued with George Washington about, like, I think it was like 3,000 slaves that the tyrant King George III wanted to free, and George Washington was like, no, we're keeping them. And so you have a lot of this tension, I think, because growing up in, like, when I'm young in school and I read these like books about American history, I think, oh yeah, like all the founding fathers, they were like good, righteous Christians, and all the British people were bad, oppressive tyrants. But when you think about it, it's like there were a lot of Christians involved in the American Revolution, but that doesn't mean all of them were. And like stuff like George Washington, like I don't know personally if he was truly a Christian, because apparently there was, apparently his wife was devout, but I want to say, I read somewhere, don't quote me on this, or you can research it further for yourself, even better. But I want to say, like, George Washington didn't even like being in church, and so he wouldn't even go. And so that can call into questions like, was he really Christian? But
you got to think too that they separated religion from religion from the church. Like, they separated it from the church, and a lot of the founding fathers had the big influence on it because they knew it would cause conflict. Because you can see, like, with Rome and all that, they had religion in the courts and all that, and it destroyed Rome. And like other thinking of it, other civilizations like China and all that, like, collapse because religion plays a big role in a lot of things. And the founding fathers realized we need to separate religion from church, separate political from church, because they knew it would cause conflict with each other.
Yeah, definitely. One of the things that I thought was interesting, because as I get older, I'm like, okay, I'm a Christian. I like Christian stuff. And so I like leaders who are Christians. And one of the big things that people who are listening or watching may have experienced, or maybe even thought about, like when I was a kid, but like Christian nationalism. It gets thrown around, it's a fancy term, but basically it has to do with like a nation being Christian, like solely. Like that is the only religion that they uphold. And so it encourages all the citizens of said nation to be Christian. However, unfortunately, in America, it seems like we can't get that, because you have in the Constitution and stuff like that, you have freedom of religion. And so clearly you had, of course, the founding fathers that had different views and different religions. And so they're like, we can all be together, but we have to divide. We can't be Christian. We have to be free for all people, which is good, but it could also be interesting because you have a lot of Christians that are like, because there were some Christians who were founding fathers, that means, and, it was heavily influenced by the Bible. Like the way we make our laws is heavily influenced by Christian teachings. And so, therefore, we are a Christian nation. And a lot of America, or at least used to be Christian. And so that's their view. But the problem with Christian nationalism, especially in America, is that it kind of, unfortunately, can't happen. Because the whole point written into our laws is you can believe in whatever religion you want and whatever God you want. Which is unfortunate, but hey, it's a free nation, it's a free country. That's how it's designed. So if we really want Christian nationalism where we have our whole country is Christian, I feel like you get that more with monarchies and stuff. Like think of King George III. His whole country of Kingdom of England was Anglican, was Christian. Now, of course, you're going to have some people there that aren't really Christian, but for the most part, that is the only religion that they uphold. Because any other religion that comes in, they're like, no, you can't be here. Yeah. This is a Christian nation. And so you can have that with a monarchy because all you need is one person or one family to be Christian. And then boom, that's a Christian nation. But the problem with America is that because we have all these flavors, this whole mixing bowl, it kind of can't happen. So I would like to think, and I will definitely fight hard. I encourage people, if you live in America, do your duty and vote and stuff like that to get Christians and God honoring people into office that will uphold, Christian values and whatnot. But at the same time, we got to realize that it is written into our laws, our bare fundamental laws, that we can't oppress other religions. Yeah. Because we were never meant to do that in the first place. Yeah. If you want to only have Christian, then I would go to some of these places in Europe. But for America, we got to keep in mind that, hey, yes, Christianity is the one true religion, but the law of America says we can't force that on people. So that's one thing to think about. So back on the Founding Fathers, one of them was John Witherspoon, which was actually, he was a Presbyterian pastor or minister, and he was one of the signers of the Declaration. And he would preach sermons defending resistance to tyranny on biblical grounds. So he would quote stuff let's see if I can find it, Acts 5:29. I can have it right here. All right, Acts 5:29. Then Peter and the other apostles answered and said, we ought to obey God rather than men. And so apparently they quoted verses like that to state that, hey, when stuff like the apostles were sharing the gospel and then they were, oppressed and attacked by world leaders, at the end of the day, they were like, yes, we're going to submit to authority. If you arrest us, we're going to go willingly to jail. But we're not going to stop preaching the gospel. We're not going to stop what God gives to do because God is above you. And so when it comes to what the Bible says, what God says, rather than what the government says, God always comes first, obviously. Yeah. But there still is an element of you got to submit to authority. Like Jesus said, render unto Caesar's what is Caesar's. And so that's one thing to take into accountability. But we can have a healthy balance between the two. We don't have to say, well, even with the first side, you're allowed to rebel against the government if they are not doing what aligns with Scripture, basically. And I agree with that, because if the government is the government position is only as powerful as the law, is what the law says. And so if they start changing the law or contradicting the law, then they got to go. And apparently, I want to say here, let me pull up right here. Apparently, it's one of the things that was floating around during the time, especially with Presbyterians, and it was a book called the Lex Rex, and it was by Samuel Rutherford. I really want to get that book to read it, but it was basically about political theology of how the church and religion mix. And basically what Samuel Rutherford says in this book that was floating around, a lot of founding fathers and Christians would have read this book. And it's saying, hey, the law says this. If the king or president or whoever it is contradicts that law, then they got to go. And I really like that, because you have someone saying that, hey, we got to submit to authority, but when that authority goes overboard and it goes against God, then we are allowed to go against them, which in of itself makes sense. But we have to be careful not to just be anarchists, down with all government because it's all corrupt. And most of the time, yes, it is all corrupt. Governments are going to be corrupt. That's the way the world works, unfortunately. Satan and his demons have, control over certain things. But yeah, that's one of the things that we got to consider. Which another thing that I want to get into of what influenced the revolution, in mainly this book, in large part Lex Rex by Samuel Rutherford, essentially saying that, hey, you can take out tyrants if they contradict God, which I agree with. Then again, that's probably just the American in me. All right, my second point is kind of getting to, you know what? Let's skip over that for sake of time. So, we were talking about earlier, religious freedom, and how that is a Christian ideal, arguably. And so the founding generation believed true Christian faith required freedom of conscience, which became a cornerstone of American law. So I do agree that the Christian faith requires freedom of conscience. Obviously, you can't force a religion on somebody. They got to truly believe in their heart. So apparently there was some historical people at the time, like the 1600s. There was a guy named Roger Williams who kind of influenced this thought of religious liberty when he says forced worship stinks in God's nostrils, which is interesting. James Madison, in his apparently he made a book called Memorial and Remonstrance by in 1785, and he said this in that book, quote, "The religion of every man must be left to the conviction and conscience of every man." Which is true. The whole thing about the personal relationship with Jesus. And apparently there was some Baptist influence as well, supporting the revolution, like a lot of Christians would do that, because they believe that a republic would better protect religious freedom than the Anglican structure of England. Which we can argue about that all day. I know I have some Anglican friends that would say, well, we could have done it better. And there was actually a lot of Anglicans on the American side fighting with the Americans, because the whole point was not so much, it was mainly against the king and against the parliament and stuff like that. Not necessarily the denomination. Because if you think about the revolutionary, the revolution people, like you said before, taxes and stuff, taxation without representation and stuff like that really, angered them and stuff like that, which makes sense. They didn't really have a problem with the denomination of Anglicanism. So I guess maybe there's some people out there that would think Anglicanism, okay, that's British people, and British people are tyrants or something like that. There's a lot of people, I'm not going to say, because I don't want to be rude, but there's a lot of people that just don't know. Yeah, they just don't know, but that's okay. So, let's get into another point that I have, that is the moral, number 5, the moral character of a republic, Christian virtue and self-government. So here's the key idea. Founders believed the success of the republic depended on the virtue of its people, something they tied directly to Christian morality. You had John Adams that would say, quote, "Our Constitution was made only for a moral and righteous people. It is wholly inadequate to a government of any other." What do you think about that when it comes to the world we live in today?
Well, we're all sinful people.
Yeah.
So that's my thing on that one. I feel too is as Christians, I feel like we as a duty, like me and you, have to check on each other and like have one-on-one, how would I word this? Basically, like, keep each other accountable as Christians. And if we know there's someone not doing the right thing, be like, hey, man, let's do better. My thing is, like I was going to say on verse Jeremiah 17:9, like, humans are sinful and we cannot be trusted, unchecked powers. So I feel like, too, is like the fall that happened. We're sinful people. But Jesus died on the cross to save our sin, which I feel like too is like the early church had problems with different like Methodists and then Anglican and then like Baptist and Presbyterian had. The thing is, the Bible tells the truth. People can twist what they want to with the Bible. We're sinful people. But if you stick to God's word, go astray. If you shouldn't go astray if you follow God's words. But we as humans have our own interpretation. Like, I'll have my interpretation if I read a different line than you do. We might disagree, but we have to go, our foundation needs to be back on the Bible. Exactly. It does not need to be in our own mind, because our mind is sinful. Unfortunately, that's the case we're in. But the Bible is not wrong. The Bible is the truth. He is the Word.
Absolutely. Amen to that. Yeah. I mean, you have, like I said, like there's probably a lot of propaganda at the time that where Christians were going against Christians, unfortunately. But like, if you stick to the Bible, there is clearly, you had the apostles that rebelled by not following their orders, even though they did submit, like they're being arrested or something like that. Like, they followed the laws, but if the laws contradicted what God called them to do, they did it anyway, because God is over them. And it led to all their deaths. So I think that's important for Christians today to also realize is, even though, like, I'm sure, like, even if I got my way, all of America would be automatically Christian, and all the laws would favor Christianity, and nothing, evil or demonic.
And two, we'll tie this back, is like the Americans had their own views on slavery. Yeah, and that was a big thing, even in that time period, is because like Thomas Jefferson had a slave. I know he had a wife that was a slave. I think George Washington definitely had a slave. And seeing the way they treated the slaves, they weren't slaves. They're people just like us. But they had their own interpretation, and where I'm getting at is we're sinful.
Yeah. And unfortunately, like I said, like, it couldn't work if I could just magically wave my hand and everything was Christian, everybody was Christian, because we're gonna have disagreement. Yes. There's gonna be disunity.
100%.
That's what Satan wants. He wants there to be division. But at the end of the day, we got to realize that we can't make things exactly the way we want them to be. We got to accept that sometimes. I don't like accepting it. I want everything to be the way I want it to be, just because I'm a control freak of my own life. But at the end of the day, like, the apostles weren't trying to change the laws of these empires and stuff, but they were just preaching the gospel, and they were supporting Christianity and building up Christianity. And even though they were killed for it, they happily did it as martyrs for Christ. And at the end of the day, because they built up Christianity, because they weren't trying to force the changing of laws, they're focused on the gospel. And the gospel, Christianity, eventually took over all these things. Like, Rome fell, and then Christianity spread, and Rome was no longer pagan, and Rome became Christian. And then you have all these other, like, all of Europe is arguably, like, a lot of them are Christian nations. Not just like America, like, they are Christian nations. Like, there's some countries in Europe right now where, like, they don't allow, like, Muslim propaganda or stuff like that, because Christianity is the true religion. Which I definitely admire and respect, but the whole point that I'm trying to get at is it was God that allowed Christianity to grow, because he used the people to focus on the gospel. he didn't use people to focus on the government. You know, if you focus on the gospel, the government will change, maybe, if God wills it. So I can only imagine, like, if we stopped focusing on, you know, trying to, all this bickering about laws and the government. Yes, we should be protecting our rights and all that and doing our due diligence. But at the same time, if we focus on spreading the gospel and changing hearts, God will change people's hearts, and then you will have more cooperation, you know, hypothetically, in a perfect world. And so I think that's important to realize too. Like, I mean, if you think about even the founding fathers and like presidents throughout history, like there was a lot of people, especially like after the First Enlightenment, Second Enlightenment, or whatever, that influenced America a lot. And then you had American presidents that are like, oh yeah, I'm openly Christian, stuff like that. You know, whether or not they did horrible things, but that's not the point. The point is, like, Christianity was, I want to say it was like the 70s or 60s, where I think it was like 91% of America identified as Christian. And of course that number has dropped. And I think 2022 there was like, I want to say like 60-50%. So it has dropped. We are seeing certain numbers rise, especially in the, you know, in our lifetime in the past couple of years, which is great. But the whole point is, if you focus on the gospel, that will influence the government. Yeah. But if you focus on the government, you can mess stuff up. And you might see that in like the way we conduct foreign policy. But that's, you know, other episodes we'll talk about different stuff like that. But like, if we focus on changing the laws and changing our government to make it more Christian, then you're going to have a lot of people in the world, in America, that are still not Christian. Yeah. And so, but if you go through the people and change their hearts, then the government becomes more Christian. Or at least that's my view on it.
Well, we'll go back to this thing. You know, he had two big commandments: love your neighbor as yourself, and that, like, right there, you just said it right there. Pretty much is like, if you love your neighbor as yourself. I'm trying to remember. There was the other one.
Love your Lord your God with
all your heart,
soul, mind, and strength.
I mean, those two things like would change a lot. Like we wouldn't have issues. Well, we would have issues because we're sinful people, but it would dramatically drop. It would
dramatically affect all of our lives in a positive way.
100%.
You know, I mean, and that's the big struggle of all of our daily lives, is that we have to actively choose to follow God and choose to be more loving to others and be loving to God. Or else we're going to have problems that we have today. You know, and I'm guilty of this, you know. I add to it. You know, we're all adding to the mess.
Yes.
But I mean, even though we might seem to have like a small amount of influence in our lives, if every person had the mindset of I can, you know, be more loving, and if everybody did that, then it would fix everything.
Oh yeah.
But that's the thing, like, people can also get like depressed about like the state of our country, you know, and the state of other countries, you know, persecuting Christians and stuff like that. You know, I've talked about, even a couple of weeks ago, I talked about how England actually has a law now where if you live around an abortion clinic, you can't pray, like, even quietly to yourself. Like, even if you're speaking no verbal words, you can get arrested for praying if you're close to an abortion clinic, because they assume that you're praying about the abortion clinic, and they think that that's a negative thing, and so they're like, go.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And there's so many videos online where Christians are like, you know, they're like standing far away from the abortion clinic, and they're just standing there praying, not doing anything, and cops come up and is like, are you praying to yourself about the abortion clinic? And then they just arrest you. And I'm like, arresting for praying?
That's
like that. Yikes. Like, you have that in different countries. And I'm sure there's worse in other places too. But like
I know North Korea, like, it's worse there. So at least we have our freedoms here in the U.S. Like we like the founding fathers wrote, like, for free speech, and then like the freedom of like religion, like, and like that is the key of the Constitution, because if we didn't have that, it it would be very bad.
Yeah.
Very bad.
But it also ties into, like, a lot of people will get mad about, oh, our rights are being taken away. Are you using those rights?
Yeah.
Like, I'll be honest. Like, I have the right of freedom of expression, religion, and freedom of speech, but I don't use it like I should. I should be telling everybody I can when given the opportunity and when God, God wills it to share the gospel, but I don't because I'm lazy and I'm, nervous or what have you. So we have rights. Why not use them? One, while we still have them, and two, if we use them, maybe that would affect the fact that we have them more. If that makes sense. Like, if we keep on going at the state we are and we don't try to fix things by being more kind and loving and following God, then it's only going to get worse.
Yeah.
And if it gets worse, then they'll start taking rights away. Like, now you can't pray and you can't be Christian. And then they'll start persecuting Christians like in other countries and other, times in history. And so, but if you use the rights that we have right now, maybe we won't get to that point because we would be affecting positively the world and specifically our nation. And so I think that's one thing to consider. We kind of got off track, but like this was a really good discussion.
Yeah.
Like,
it was great.
I mean, I had like a loose thing anyway, but like one, like if you had the King George himself saying, oh yeah, that's like a Presbyterian revolt, and you have the Presbyterians who are influencing all these other people. Like, yes, there was a lot of Christians, even like Presbyterian pastors who were like the founding fathers.
Yeah.
You had a lot of people that, to be fair, weren't Christian at all, or were agnostic, that thought, maybe there's a God, maybe there's not. And then there's some that were like in weird cults and stuff like that. But like, that's the whole point. That's why you had the whole freedom of religion, because not everybody agreed. If everybody agreed, it would probably be a Christian nation, but that's not the case. Yeah. And so, I mean, we should not be careful. We should be careful to say, America is a Christian nation. Maybe, maybe not. The whole point is any religion. Freedom of like that's the whole point. Now, I'm not saying that other religions are valid. They're absolutely not. Christianity is the only one, the only true religion. But in America specifically, our laws allow everybody. And so, I mean, there will be people mad that, I think in like Michigan, there's like a really large growing Muslim population, and they're bringing their religion there. And, Muslim and Judaism and all those other religions are spreading throughout America as well, because we have that freedom of expression and freedom of religion, which is good. Freedom is good, but I don't think it's worth Christians getting mad about it because it's written in your laws. Now, again, if I had it my way, it would just be Christian. But we also can't get mad at other people when our laws say, like, America is a government like any other. It's great. We have a good amount of laws, some better than some countries in the world. But at the end of the day, we're a government led by like a republic democracy. And so you're going to have people who aren't Christian making laws that aren't Christian. You can't, we got to accept that to a sense of if you disagree with them, obviously. But also, we shouldn't get mad that they exist in America, because the whole point of our laws is that you can have freedom of religion. And so let's not get mad at the way things are, but let's instead focus on how we can make things better, is my view on it. Any closing things that you would like to add?
Not on top of my head.
I mean,
it was a lot. But like it was very I learned a lot. I learned a lot from it tonight. Like I was like, "Oh, this is interesting." I will say this. I'll put it at this. I'm glad the founding fathers had put the separation from religion and like the law, or religion and political separated, because I feel like it would have caused more tension with these other churches, because you've seen how, like, example, like England, you were talking about England, like, as the dictatorship and like, or a monarchy with the king and the queen, And now that has slowly went away with England. Like basically, the British Prime Minister is basically doing what is told, and the king and queen is basically a figurehead. They're not really like
more ceremonial.
Yeah, they're not more like doing that, which I think it should be in the people's hands. I 100% believe that our laws should be in the people's hands, but we need to have a voice to express our opinions, because if we don't say nothing, nothing's going to change.
Yeah.
And as our culture has changed for the last 100 years, like 150, 100 years, like now it's like, I think, don't count me on this, but I think in Texas, they just passed a law about putting the 10 Commandments in schools.
Yeah.
And I think South Carolina is one of them. I don't know if South Carolina is one yet, but they were talking about putting it in South Carolina schools.
I don't think they're one yet. I want to say Texas, and I think one other state have like been big on that, of where 10 Commandments are back in schools.
Yes, and I'm kind of like, in a way, like, does it need to be back in schools? Because, like, you know, I feel like it would be good for... Is it basically taking away their freedom? Like, the way... Because we were talking about before, like, we have a choice. Like, we don't want to force religion into that because it causes conflict with other things. Which I'm not against it. I honestly support that in schools, because I feel like as a young person at a young age, reading stories in the Bible, it helps as a young person. And I'll say this because I'm big on it, like the Chronicles of Narnia. We'll get that as another transit, but I'm not going to get into deep on that.
No.
I highly, like, as a kid, I remember reading those, and I'm like, oh my goodness. I'm like, I can relate to this. And a lot of it's biblical. And you go look at it, I can go hours on that. We're not going to transit on that. But I'm just saying, like, I feel like it would be better in schools, like a 30-minute class on religion. If they don't care, they don't care. I mean, I wouldn't fail a student for it if they don't, don't force it on them. Let them see it with their own eyes. And if they want to know God, let it happen. Yeah. I think forcing something to happen will not change anything. It will make it worse. God opens and closes doors for reasons. And I believe as Christians, we shouldn't force something if we don't agree with them, because that is how issues happen. And as humans, we're sinful. We said this multiple times tonight. I'm sinful, you're sinful. But if we learn from our mistakes and go back to God, because God is the center of everything. As Christians, I feel like a lot of people say we're Christians, but are you really Christians? You have to know God, read His Word, give your life to Him. And I know a lot of people that are like, oh yeah, we're Christians. And I'm like, and I'm around them, I'm like, you act way different than what you talk. Like, if you're really Christians, you shouldn't be doing this. So, as one of my friends says, talk the walk. Mm-hmm. Don't remember the whole thing, but
talk the walk, walk the talk, don't talk the walk or something.
Yes,
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't either.
It's something
but
like
yeah,
that.
Something like that. But I think as Christians, teaching our children His Word changes the way things are. And I think the Anglican Church, as we talked about, they started to see the way it was going in England, and they were like, I want a better life for my kids. And that's why they all went down to Jamestown on the Mayflower, and they colonized, because they wanted religion. They wanted God, or how to word this. They wanted religion not to be like, they didn't want the monarch telling them what they can do or what they couldn't do with Christianity. And I agree, like, the freedom with the Constitution has made America, like, you can worship what you want to worship, but my thing is, the Bible is the truth, the way, and the light. And you can say what you want to say and change it, but you can't change the Bible. The Bible's black and white. It's
Yeah.
you can't change it. So
Yeah, I mean that's one of the things, like the Puritans. The name that they got from that is like, we want to purify the Anglican Church. So, like, they split from the Anglican Church arguably, but like they're like, we'll go to this new land because we want to get back to the way it should be, or how they thought it should be.
Yeah.
Now you're gonna have, like you said, a lot of different interpretations and stuff like that. But I mean, on one hand, yes, do not force Christianity down people's throats, because then it will give people like, oh, like I don't like Christianity because it's been forced down me.
Yeah.
And like, there's a lot of people I know, even people we work with, that like went to Catholic school or whatnot, and so it was forced down them, but like they were never taught it in their families, because that's where it starts with the families. Because if the families aren't Christian, but then you're going to school and taught all this Christian stuff, then you're like, well, this all must be lies because my mom and dad didn't teach me any of this. Like, my school doesn't teach me any of this. This school does. But, when you're trying to force something, it has to happen naturally. So stuff like the Ten Commandments, I do agree that we should have them in our schools, just because, one, like you said, Bible supreme.
100%,
Instantly.
100%.
But like, at the same time, a kid will be reading them and they'll be like, what is that? Like, they'll start to ask questions, and then you have an opportunity.
And it's very good. And it's very good to ask questions, because I like this. Is like, I'll give an example. Is like, I like asking questions when I reread something and I like it. I'm like, okay, what is this? I want to dig more into it. And I think as humans, we want to learn more about God. If you really, how do I word this? Because some people don't know about God unless, and this is our thing, is we've done so bad as in the past few decades, is like, we're scared to get out of our shells and talk about God. I mean, I struggle with it. There's people I'm like, I know we need to talk about God. Like, people at workplace, that's my big thing, is like, dang, I want to get out of my comfort zone. I want to just say, hey. But
I'm the same way.
Yeah, and it's kind of hard to do that in the way the world we're in, because it's more of a secular world, and we're not. What would it be? Not secular, but it'd be where we're at. Conservative. What?
I think secular would be the right word.
Yeah,
like,
secular would be the right word, but I'm thinking for Christianity, like, it has changed so much. It's like, there's certain like places you can't really mention God, and it's kind of sad. Because I feel like, in a way, you have the freedom and right to speak on it. And, like, you don't, like, you can just say and mention it, but I don't feel like it should be taken away.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I think we have a right to speak our own mind. We're going to disagree. We're not perfect. I'm not. My thing is, there's a lot of people that we disagree on things. But the main goal, I'm going to just say this, is the one thing is, God. It's straight right there. God is God. You can't change something it's written, like 10 Commandments. It's written plainly right there. You can't, if you want to change it, you can't change it. Those are his laws. Unfortunately, I think someone sees that like, why is that? I don't know. I'm not God. But God put these laws here for a reason. And us breaking them is basically sinning against God, which is wrong. And I think we need to realize that God is the one. He's truth, the way, the light. And I think I feel like as Christians, we need to do a better time of, like, sometimes I remember I was in chapel at North Greenville, and we were sitting down, and I remember a preacher coming up and talking. He was a professor about we like to call other people out, but sometimes we need to look at our own selves. I forgot what in the Bible, but it's like a camel's needle. It's something in your own eye.
Oh yeah, like the speck in your own eye versus like the wood beam in your own eye.
Yes. I feel like for us is like, we don't need. Sometimes we need to check on ourselves before we call other people out. And that's what I'm telling you. Like, I'm not perfect. I'm sinful. Like, I remember a few weeks ago, I got mad. And I was like, dang, why am I mad at this person where I struggle too? Like, I shouldn't be getting mad at someone where I have my own issues too. I need to be like, okay, they're probably going through something. I'm going through something. and sometimes we think before we speak.
Yeah.
And I struggle with it. I told you I'm a sinful person. But if I want to do better, and I talked to my pastor about this, I struggle reading my Bible. I'll be honest with you. I'm not perfect at it. I'm not going to be. But the word, you're not going to learn nothing unless you read it. Reading his word it's talking to God, having fellowship with him. If you're not talking to him, you can't have fellowship with him. It just doesn't work like that. But I really enjoyed this talk. It was fun. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. I have a quick last thing to say, and that is there was like a statistic of like the population. Apparently, like, let me see if I can see it. Like, probably like some historians would say like 1/3 or maybe half of the fighters, like in the army, were like Christian or Presbyterian in some cases. Like, let's see. There is let's see if I can hunt down his name. There's a historian called Paul R. Carson, and apparently he would say this quote. Well, he mentions how Presbyterian clergy, like the pastors, would join the army. And then he also estimated that more than half of all the soldiers and officers in the American army during the Revolution were Presbyterian, and not counting the other Christian denominations. And so you had, you get a lot of Presbyterians that are like, we influenced the revolution so much, which they did, to be fair, but there was other denominations too. But like that just goes to show that, hey, Christianity influenced it a lot.
Oh yeah,
more than some people would give it credit for. And
a lot of the loyalists too were probably Presbyterian, if I'm correct by that, because you were saying
a lot of the loyalists were like Anglican. Like a lot of the British on the other side were also Christian. And unfortunately, you get that stuff with like the Civil War also. But like, yeah, I mean, research it for yourself is pretty interesting. Kind of a bunch of rambling. I am going to shout out to Matt. He actually has a podcast coming up. I want to say this fall, where it's going to like really start off. And the Lamppost Theory, which is essentially like a Narnia themed podcast, where he's going to be talking all things Narnia. So I definitely encourage you to. I'll have like a link in the description to his Instagram page. So you go follow him, give support to him, because soon this fall he is going to start doing that, and that's going to be really fun.
I told you we're going to do a collab soon.
Oh,
we're gonna definitely do it, because it's going to be very interesting. I'm excited.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for joining me, and thank y'all for listening.
Thank y'all.
Y'all have a great rest of y'all's week.